maybe also just a comment on AGI representing, before even the term existed, representing a kind of community. Now, you've talked about this in the past, sort of AI has come in waves, but there's always been this community of people who dream about creating uh, general human level super intelligent systems. Uh, can you maybe give your sense of the history of this community as it exists today, as it existed before this deep learning revolution, all throughout the winters and the summers of AI?
Sure. First, I would say, as a side point, the winters and summers of AI are greatly exaggerated by Americans.
Yeah.
And in the if you look at the publication record of the artificial intelligence community since, say, the 1950s, you would find a pretty steady growth and advance of ideas and papers. And what's thought of as an AI winter or summer was sort of how much money is the U.S. military pumping into AI, which was meaningful. On the other hand, there was AI going on in Germany, UK, and in Japan, and in Russia, all over the place, while U.S. military got more and less enthused about AI. So,
That happened to be, just for people who don't know, the U.S. military happened to be the main source of funding for AI research. So another way to phrase that is it's up and down of funding for artificial intelligence research.
And I would say the correlation between funding and intellectual advance was not 100%, right? Because, in Russia, as an example, or in Germany, there was less dollar funding than in the US, but many foundational ideas were laid out, but it was more theory than implementation, right? And US really excelled at sort of breaking through from theoretical papers to working implementations, which did go up and down somewhat with U.S. military funding, but still, you can look in the 1980s. Dietrich Dörner in Germany had self-driving cars on the Autobahn, right? And it was a little early with regard to the car industry, so it didn't catch on such as has happened now. But that whole advancement of self-driving car technology in Germany was pretty much independent of AI military summers and winters in the US. So there's been more going on in AI globally than not only most people on the planet realize, but than most new AI PhDs realize, because they've come up within a certain sub field of AI and haven't had to look so much beyond that. But I would say when I got my PhD in 1989 in mathematics, I was interested in AI already.
In Philadelphia,
I started at NYU, then I transferred to Philadelphia, to Temple University, good old North Philly.
North Philly,
the pearl of the U.S. Right? You never stopped at a red light then, because you were afraid if you stopped at a red light, someone will carjack you. So you just drive through every red light. Every day driving or bicycling to Temple from my house was like a new adventure. Right? But the reason I didn't do a PhD in AI was what people were doing in the academic AI field then was just astoundingly boring and seemed wrongheaded to me. It was really like rule-based expert systems and production systems. And I loved mathematical logic. I had nothing against logic as the cognitive engine for an AI, but the idea that you could type in the knowledge that AI would need to think seemed just completely stupid and wrong-headed to me. You can use logic if you want, but somehow the system has got to be
automated,
learning, right? It should be learning from experience. And the AI field then was not interested in learning from experience. Some researchers certainly were. I remember in mid-'80s, I discovered a book by John Andreas, which was about a reinforcement learning system called PURPUS, PURR-PUSS, which was an acronym that I can't even remember what it was for, but purpose anyway. But that was a system that was supposed to be an AGI, and basically by some sort of fancy like Markov decision process learning, it was supposed to learn everything just from the bits coming into it and learn to maximize its reward and become intelligent, right? So that was there in academia back then, but it was like isolated, scattered, weird people. But all these isolated, scattered, weird people in that period, I mean, they laid the intellectual grounds for what happened later. So you look at John Andreas at University of Canterbury with his purpose reinforcement learning Markov system. He was the PhD supervisor for John Cleary in New Zealand. Now, John Cleary worked with me when I was at Waikato University in 1993 in New Zealand. And he worked with Ian Witten there, and they launched Weka, which was the first open source machine learning toolkit, which was launched in, I guess, 93 or 94 when I was at Waikato University.
Written in Java, unfortunately.
Written in Java, which was a cool language back then, though, right?
Yeah,
And
I guess it's still, well, it's not cool anymore, but it's, it's powerful.
I find, like most programmers now, I find Java unnecessarily bloated. But back then it was like Java or C++, basically. And Java was
object-oriented, so it's
Java
nice.
was easier for students.
Yeah.
Amusingly, a lot of the work on Weka when we were in New Zealand was funded by a New Zealand government grant to use machine learning to predict the menstrual cycles of cows. So in the U.S., all the grant funding for AI was about how to kill people or spy on people. In New Zealand, it's all about cows or kiwi fruits, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, I mean, John Andreas had his probability theory-based reinforcement learning proto-AGI. John Cleary was trying to do much more ambitious probabilistic AGI systems. Now, John Cleary helped do Weka, which was the first open source machine learning toolkit, so the predecessor for TensorFlow and Torch and all these things. Also, Shane Legg was at Waikato working with John Cleary and Ian Witten and this whole group, and then working with my company WebMind, an AI company I had in the late 90s with a team there at Waikato University, which is how Shane got his head full of AGI, which led him to go on and with Demis Hassabis found DeepMind. So what you can see through that lineage is, in the 80s and 70s, John Andreas was trying to build probabilistic reinforcement learning AGI systems. The technology, the computers just weren't there to support it. His ideas were very similar to what people are doing now. But, although he's long since passed away and didn't become that famous outside of Canterbury, I mean, the lineage of ideas passed on from him to his students to their students. You can go trace directly from there to me and to DeepMind, right? So that there was a lot going on in AGI that did ultimately lay the groundwork for what we have today, but there wasn't a community, right? And so when I started trying to pull together an AGI community, it was in the early aughts when I was living in Washington, D.C. and making a living doing AI consulting for various U.S. government agencies. And I organized the first AGI workshop in 2006. And I mean, it wasn't like it was literally in my basement or something. I mean, it was in the conference room at the Marriott in Bethesda. It's not that edgy or underground, unfortunately, but still.
How many people attended?
About 60 or something.
That's not bad.
I mean, DC has a lot of AI going on, probably until the last 5 or 10 years, much more than Silicon Valley, although it's just quiet because of the nature of what happens in DC. Their business isn't driven by PR. Mostly when something starts to work really well, it's taken black and becomes even more quiet, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the thing is that really had the feeling of a group of starry-eyed mavericks, like huddled in a basement, like plotting how to overthrow the narrow AI establishment. And, for the first time, in some cases, coming together with others who shared their passion for AGI and a technical seriousness about working on it, right? And that's very, very different than what we have today. I mean, now it's a little bit different. We have AGI conference every year, and there's several hundred people rather than 50. Now it's more like this is the main gathering of people who want to achieve AGI and think that large-scale nonlinear regression is not the golden path to AGI.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's
AKA neural networks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, certain architectures for
Sure.
for learning using neural networks. So yeah, the AGI conferences are sort of now the main concentration of people not obsessed with deep neural
The
nets and deep
rebels.
reinforcement learning, but still interested in AGI. Not the only ones. I mean, there's other little conferences and groupings interested in human level AI and cognitive architectures and so forth. But yeah, it's been a big shift. Like back then, you couldn't really. It would be very, very edgy then to give a university department seminar that mentioned AGI or human level AI. It was more like you had to talk about something more short term and immediately practical. Then, in the bar after the seminar, you could bullshit about AGI in the same breath as time travel or the simulation hypothesis or something, right? Whereas now AGI is not only in the academic seminar room, like you have Vladimir Putin knows what AGI is. And he's like, Russia needs to become the leader in AGI, right? So national leaders and CEOs of large corporations. I mean, the CTO of Intel, Justin Ratner, this was years ago, Singularity Summit conference, 2008 or something. He's like, we believe Ray Kurzweil, the singularity will happen in 2045, and it will have Intel inside. So, I mean, it's gone from being something which is the pursuit of like crazed mavericks, crackpots, and science fiction fanatics to being, a marketing term for large corporations and national leaders, right? Which is a astounding transition. But yeah, in the course of this transition, I think a bunch of sub-communities have formed, and the community around the AGI conference series is certainly one of them. It hasn't grown as big as I might have liked it to. On the other hand, sometimes a modest-sized community can be better for making intellectual progress. Yeah. Also, like you go to a Society for Neuroscience conference, you have 35 or 40,000 neuroscientists. On the one hand, it's amazing. On the other hand, you're not going to talk to the leaders of the field there if you're an outsider.
Yeah, in the same sense, the AAAI, the artificial intelligence, the main kind of generic artificial intelligence conference is too big. It's too amorphous. Like it doesn't make it doesn't.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
And NIPS has become a company advertising outlet now. Right? So
I mean, to comment on the role of AGI in the research community, I'd still, if you look at NeurIPS, if you look at CVPR, if you look at these iClear, AGI is still seen as the outcast. I would say in these main machine learning and these main artificial intelligence conferences amongst the researchers, I don't know if it's an accepted term yet. What I've seen bravely, you mentioned Shane Legg, is DeepMind and then OpenAI are the two places that are, I would say, unapologetically so far. I think it's actually changing, unfortunately, but so far they've been pushing the idea that the goal is to create an AGI.
Well, they have billions of dollars behind them. So, I mean, that in the public mind, that certainly carries some oomph, right? I mean,
but they also have really strong researchers, right?
They do. They're great teams. I mean, DeepMind in particular. But, yeah.
And they have, DeepMind has Marcus Hutter walking around. I mean, there's all these folks who basically their full-time position involves dreaming about creating AGI.
Yeah, I mean, Google Brain has a lot of amazing AGI-oriented people also. I mean, and I mean, so I'd say from a public marketing view, DeepMind and OpenAI are the two large, well-funded organizations that have put the term and concept AGI out there sort of as part of their public image. But I mean, they're certainly not. There are other groups that are doing research that seems just as AGI-ish to me. I mean, including a bunch of groups in Google's main Mountain View office. So yeah, it's true. AGI is somewhat away from the mainstream now, but if you compare to where it was, 15 years ago, there's been an amazing mainstreaming. And you could say the same thing about super longevity research, which is one of my my application areas that I'm excited about. I mean, I've been talking about this since the 90s, but working on this since 2001. And back then, really, to say you're trying to create therapies to allow people to live hundreds or thousands of years, you were way, 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 way out of the industry academic mainstream. But now, Google had Project Calico, Craig Venter had Human Longevity Incorporated, and then once the suits come marching in, right? I mean, once there's big money in it, then people are forced to take it seriously, because that's the way modern society works.
Yeah.
So it's still not as mainstream as cancer research, just as AGI is not as mainstream as automated driving or something. But the degree of mainstreaming that's happened in the last 10 to 15 years is astounding to those of us who've been at it for a while.